Welcome into another edition of Locked On Bills. I'm your host, Kevin Messeri, here with Jason Shannon. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kevin. I'm crossing my fingers that we don't get news broken during the show for the fourth time in a row.
I don't know that I'd mind, actually.
Yeah,
Honestly,
I guess it's
I'm
content.
like half thinking about that, like what could happen. They're at the owners' meeting, probably flying home tonight, but I don't know. I don't even know what could happen. It'd have to be like a trade or something.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about the owners' meeting, some of the rules that came out there, some of the heavy hitting stories. We haven't been on actually since the Zay Jones incident, so we might quickly, briefly touch on that. A little bit of draft talk, a little bit of trade up talk, a little bit of what we heard from the press conferences out of not only Terry Pagula, but obviously our general manager, Brandon Beane, and Sean McDermott. So we'll get into some of that stuff. As always, we're your local experts here, covering the great stuff, great heavy hitting stories. So check out lockedonbills.com. Big announcement. We're actually doing a Thursday show with Nick Woughton from the Buffalo Football Beat, credentialed member of the media who does a great job over there at buffalofootballbeat.com. I'm a columnist over there when I put up some stuff, so check that out. Do have a great story on Eric Wood that you can read into. So anyways, let's get into that a little bit first, Jason. I want to talk a little bit, and then we'll get into the from there we'll get into the owners meeting. The salary cap situation. We're sitting at 67 players. We have 16 million in salary cap space. And our draft class is said to take up $9.7 million for a remaining balance of about $7. However, the rule of 51 exists where if you draft a player, they have to be more than the first player on the roster at $555,000. So your 6th and 7th round picks don't count. 5th round picks don't count against the cap because their salaries aren't more than the 51st best salary or lowest salary on your roster. So anytime you actually draft a player, Jason, you have to remember that about $600,000 comes off it because you're scratching out their payroll for cap purposes. And then obviously you don't have 53 men on your roster. So, when you do the 53 men, you only add another 2 minimum salaries. So for purposes of the cap, you're only really adding, I calculated about $4 million from the draft class after you're taking in the rule of 51, putting you safely at about 12, I got it about 12 million. Is that enough money to do anything remaining? Like I know Bean said he wants to keep about five or six, half of that for injuries. Like, do you just use vet minimums here, Jason, or do you think like we should like try to see if there's something we can do? Like Philadelphia literally spends every dollar. Like, kind of what's your philosophy there?
I think, obviously you just want them to spend all the money that you can. It's not our money.
Yeah, it's fake.
It's their money. It's fake money. I just think that Brandon Beane kind of set the expectations that were there. And I'm not sure that he's going to really push it at this point. I'm not saying that he has never lied or maybe gone in a different direction than something he said in a press conference, but he said a week ago, don't expect anything to hit the ticker. I'm not sure that anything will. Navarro Bowman's out there. There's a few other guys that could maybe warrant.
A lot of good safeties, actually. I don't know what happened to the safety.
Right. Eric Reed's maybe been taken off the blacklist now. Kenny Vaccaro's still out there. Trey Boston. It seems like I kind of figured that we were set there at this point. But, yeah, you keep adding talent, because we had the Raphael Bush signing. That doesn't – he could – easily be
special team or safety.
Yeah, he's a guy that could just be playing.
You have 4 active.
So yeah, if that could be just strictly a special teams guy. So yeah, we could make a move for one that would make it so that we don't have to draft one at all, really, which is good.
Nickel corner,
is good to completely fill out those positions because there's a chance still that we're not going to have that many draft picks after we make a trade. If we make a move up, that takes away 1 or 2 positions at the minimum that we're going to be able to fortify in the draft.
Yeah, for sure. And nickel corner is another need. There's still some names there that can man that, including Leonard Johnson, our old nickel last year. I believe they'd be looking at Philip Gaines, who is rumored to be on a visit tomorrow. The ex-Kansas City Chief, who had a really promising start and then just fell off the face of the earth. Did not play very well last year. But then you have names here that can play positions. I mean, William Gay, Delvin Breaux, a guy I really have liked in years past. Brashad Breeland, I don't know what's going on with him. Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie's not signed. He's saying he's waiting until April. So there's some names there. Pac-Man Jones, guy that's been do it all. Maybe give you some in the return game too. So there's some things you can do in the defensive back. It'd be nice to just totally scratch off a unit from the draft, like you mentioned. Not having very many picks is a very strong possibility. So real quickly, Eric Wood's still counting on the salary cap for a solid $9 million, pretty much 8.9. The sixth highest center not playing, and he's not playing, as well as between Groy and then Bodine, you have the highest paid centers in the league. With a pretty average group between Groy and Bodine. You're getting pretty average center play for the most in the league. Around 8% of our caps going to center. So that's something to keep note of. $45 million, roughly 25% of our cap is dead money, including Eric Wood. That is.
To you, is that a fluid situation at this point? Is that something that might change, or is he really going to be, an anchor on this cap situation throughout the whole year? Do we have any indication that what's going on with that?
Yeah. So I kind of covered it a little bit. It's pretty obvious that they're doing whatever they can to lower that cap figure and trying to figure out a way to be creative with it, because just that contract extension he signed couldn't have came at a worse time for the Bills. On Eric Wood's end, he ended up getting $5 million, his whole base salary guaranteed at 318 for injury, and that's what's happening. So the Bills couldn't have been very happy about that salary became guaranteed a couple of days ago, and thus fully counting on the cap. Now what happens if you cut him? This is where it gets interesting. Due to his bonuses and his guaranteed base salary this year, he'd actually count for $10.3 million against the cap, another $1.5 million. So they're keeping him there on an active salary status because they're going to escalate even more money that they would owe to the cap. So that's what's going on right now. On top of, if you cut him June 1st, you actually save $650,000. It's a vet minimum salary. I mean, it's not much, but it is, come June 1st, you could go sign another vet minimum or have that money there for another vet or put it toward another player, causing an 8.225 dead cap hit, and then 2.116 next year, no matter what. So you're going to charge 2.1 next year, no matter what you do with them, for really the only dead cap that they should have next year, which is a blessing from the $45 million that they have this year. So I think that's what they're doing. There's still a chance. I don't know if someone's sitting with a $50 million still. Some teams do in cap space. The Bills could trade him for cap purposes. That team could then check out his injuries. That didn't seem to be on the same page with the injury that he could never play again. I don't know if that's the Bills saying he can play or if that's Eric Wood saying he can play. Any thoughts, Jason? Do you think that one of them is not on the same page?
Yeah, it always gets touchy because you never know whether they're arguing over the injury or arguing over the money or how they're going to deal with retirement or the injury settlement. And a lot of that stuff stays behind closed doors. So it's tough to tell right now. I would say it's a little ambitious to think that we could actually trade him away for somebody to take a look at him. But, I mean, who knows at this point? There's obviously a disconnect, but it would seem –
I'm essentially saying the Bills would trade him in a sixth for a seventh next in 2019. So the team, kind of like a Brock Osweiler type of thing. And then the team could then evaluate his injury. I don't think that's off. It's probably not likely. I don't think that's off the table with being a really big cap guy, as you can see from $45 million in dead space, and trading all those, ex players. And then as well as creating about $70 million next year in cap space. You can tell he's a guy that's really thinking about the cap.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime you see that a team has that much value.
The Locked On Podcast Network is excited to announce we're expanding to Major League Baseball. Meet the host of Locked On Yankees.
Hi, I'm Jesse Spector, and I'm the host of Locked On Yankees, your daily source for all things pinstripes. I'm a lifelong New Yorker who's followed the Bronx Bombers for years, covered them a bit, and can't stop talking. We're going to have a good time.
Subscribe to Locked On Yankees on iTunes, Spotify, or any of your other podcast apps. Now expanded to Major League Baseball, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To hit a certain year, that he's thought about it a little bit, and that a lot of the moves have sort of pointed towards that year being the year that maybe we do make a splash. That's why I never really thought that any of these huge contracts were going to go to the Bills, because I don't think that was the plan from the outset. But you could be looking at something next year where, Bean doesn't have just one philosophy as far as how to treat free agency. And maybe he's been just thinking, that's the year I'm going to do it. Right now, we're going to build in a few ways. We're going to build through the draft. We're going to build through some of these lower, shorter term type deals. But next year is really the year we're going to do that. And I haven't looked ahead as far as who's going to hit free agency next year, whether that's going to be a big year or not. But I just think that things are different every year, and I think that it was probably a pretty intentional plan to move a lot of that money to next year.
Yeah, and they're actually, have 41 players under contract for 2019, which is a step up from the last 2 years. So they're going to have a little bit of money, and they're going to have some of their core players still signed. They're going to have a quarterback under draft potentially, but you still have A.J. McCarron under contract as your backup, and maybe a Nick Foles situation if McCarron shows something. You're still going to have, your LaShawn McCoys, Jerry Hughes, Darlo Talele, Trent Murphys, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Shaq Lawson, even Russell Bodine, Chris Ivory, Trey White. You're going to have these guys still signed. So, you have some names, Deion Dawkins, you have some names there, even Matt Milano, Nate Peterman. So you have a lot of flexibility next year with the cap, and I think that's what they're getting into. Getting into a little bit about the owners meeting, Jason, where Sean McDermott basically, and he doesn't admit much ever. I need to go to his school of press releases and he had a great quote today.
He's got good restraint.
It was, every year teams have players, those players have a culture. It was a really good answer. I was actually shocked at how he actually thought of how to answer a question. But the exact quote I actually wanted to bring you, because I actually thought it was pretty good. Every year is a new year. Every team is a new team. Every culture is a little bit different because it's made up of people. That was the exact quote from Sean McDermott. Anyways, inside linebacker, they've admitted to needing one.
Yep.
Let's talk about inside linebacker. I think it's an interesting position, really gaping hole after Preston Brown had chosen Cincinnati for $4 million 1 year. I can't believe we weren't in on that. Bowman, Timmons, Jarrell Freeman. Anything. We've already visited with Minter, Dansby, had Hodges last year, Will Compton. Anything there that you'd be interested in, or are you hedging on the draft?
I think at this point it would be smart to go into the draft. I do think that there's a couple day two guys that I like that would have an interesting have a chance to really do anything. Darius Leonard is definitely a guy who's an athlete, played in FCS at, I believe, South Carolina State. It was sort of like a close to D1 athlete coming out and decided basically to go and get some playing time, and actually stayed in it. He basically went there so that he could work his way up to go to Clemson, and ended up just kind of really liking it there. Super athletic guy, who's long, and I think that the only thing right now is the competition in terms of, also had a good Senior Bowl week. So he's a guy that definitely would be there at least in round 2, if not round 3. There's the other guys I think that people are talking about that we could do in the first round. We could actually have pick 22, where you're looking at your guys like Leighton Vander Esch from Boise State, who's definitely like the big riser right now in terms of players. And it's not like, where did this guy come from? Came out of nowhere. He was kind of a 1-year guy at college, but people didn't think he was going to come out of school. So it's not like he rose just because he had a good combine and he measured out well and he ran well. People just hadn't really expected him and hadn't seen his tape. And the more that people see his tape, they think that he can be a real impact playing middle linebacker. And then when you go to the combine and you measure out the way that he does, and you're like, he was like really not that far off from like a Tremaine Edmonds in terms of athleticism. Now you're talking about a guy that really wows people, and he went from a guy that was a round 3 guy who looked like he had some potential to, I think he's definitely going to go in the late first round.
I think so too. Yep.
And then
kind of reminds me of a Kiko Alonso, really.
Yeah, he's got the same sort of length thing. I thought he covered decently well, but people thought that maybe once he got deeper down the field, he was starting to get lost a little bit, maybe didn't have the athleticism. But if we're really going to draft a middle linebacker on his ability to cover 20-plus yards downfield, I think you're kind of reaching a little bit.
Well, it's everyone's favorite thing to do. And, even we all get caught in like, well, he's not the greatest cover guy. Well, A, he's an inside linebacker, right?
Right.
B, you're going to always pick apart someone's coverage. You don't know if they can do it until they're in the league. And then, I don't see a free agent, any of them, that can really, Zach Brown. I don't really, Preston Brown wasn't the greatest coverage guy in the world. He had moments. Anthony Hitchens signed a humongous deal. These guys are run thumpers. Like, you're using nickel more than ever. You're using outside linebackers more than ever. I think an inside linebacker is a 2-down player now.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And it probably next year will be for us as well.
Sure.
Just the amount of 5 and 6 DB sets that you get out there between us using the nickel so much, or even, going with 3 safety sets if we're going to be able to do that next year, personnel wise. I do think that a bit of linebacker coverage isn't going to be the most important thing. I think we need somebody athletically who can get around, fight off blockers, and just make tackles. Your traditional guy, and Preston Brown did a pretty decent job last year doing it, considering he led the league in tackles.
I think it had no D-line play, really.
Especially in the defensive tackles. It helps to have guys eat up some blocks, and I think that certainly that Starr will be able to do that next year in a better way than anybody really after Darius left was able to do that. So, I think that's going to help a lot. And a guy like Vander Esch, a guy like Leonard, Rashaan Evans is another guy that people really like from Alabama, who will probably be in the 22 range is probably where he's going to get taken. I don't think he goes past the first round. I'm not as in love with him with everyone else. I think he's a good linebacker, but I think the difference between me and what I've heard from a lot of people is that people think that he's like a super athlete, and I didn't really see that. I actually saw, maybe it was hard just with the Alabama jersey on, but I thought he was closer to Reggie Ragland than he was like a super athlete, which doesn't mean you're getting a bad player, because he was a second-round pick who turns out is actually pretty good after we traded him away. But
and I've heard, obviously, there's Trey Edmonds. I've seen him all across from like top 5 to like 25.
I would guess that he'll be there at 12, but not at 22. Yeah, I think that's his range.
Yeah, and he's another good name. And I've seen a little bit about Ryan Burks from Vanderbilt. Another pretty rock solid middle second round guy, right, for those second round picks. I do think that they like one of these guys. I don't know which one. I do think that they could be, if they're going to fill a need on the defensive side, it's obviously very clearly the inside linebacker spot. They might be saving a pick for it. So I think that's a pretty interesting nugget, that they're going to try to keep a pick to take out one of these guys we just referred to.
Yeah, and I know that obviously people have quarterback as a concern or wide receiver as a concern, and they are real concerns. But I don't think there's any position we're less ready to go into. If we had to start the season tomorrow with exactly what we have right now, middle linebacker would be the worst spot on this team right now.
Yeah, and it's the final starter, I guess, in a way, because like you said, we can play some big nickel. You can play some nickel. So we don't have that third safety. I guess the closest thing to it would be Raphael Bush, but we don't have a nickel right now, or the inside linebacker. So we're missing that final starter in any formation, truly.
Right.
So yeah, it's the biggest hole. I think even like on depth charts, like.
Former player Brent Barry is listening.
When I've been doing the players only, David, I travel on the airplane and I listen to the Locked On network for any team that I'm about to cover.
So is Hall of Famer Doris Burke.
I heard your old coach Larry Brown. He's on a Locked On network podcast. He said, I might be just getting too old because I hate it when I hear people say the Pistons didn't have any stars. He said Chauncey Billups was a star.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Julian Stanford and Tanner Vallejo are like your pseudo inside linebacker, so I think it's a major need. Flipping to the other side of the ball at receiver, I absolutely furious we didn't play in the second wave of free agents. I don't even want to come close to the first wave, so I understand that thinking. But some of the deals that got signed didn't make me very happy that the Bills think that they're in good enough shape that they have a luxury to not play with the Terrell Pryors, Mike Wallace's of the world, giving them 1 year, $3 million deals. I don't know what the rationale is there in thinking, we're in great shape. I mean, we didn't even try for Jaron Browns or the Cody Latimers or the Deontay Thompsons. I don't know. Like, kind of, what's your opinion on not playing in that second wave of receivers?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We've said it before on this podcast before. I try to say it every episode. Draft receivers. I hope we draft 2 receivers. I hope we draft 2 receivers every year.
How can we?
But it's getting harder this year. And, yeah, again, I thought that some of the contracts in the first wave of receivers were ridiculous. Like, just downright hilarious. They were funny. It's going to be funny how awful they look 6 months from now, a year from now. The second wave, some of those deals were definitely like, well, yeah, I could have liked that guy. We saw Deontay Thompson in our offense last year. He was okay. He's a guy that would have been our 4th receiver, and we would have been fine with it. Mm-hmm. Some of the other players, too, that signed those deals, yeah, like maybe you want to take a shot on Pryor. One of the reasons I don't like being critical completely, I wish we would have signed somebody just to bring somebody in, but I think it is still harder for the Bills to sign guys. I think they still have to pay maybe a little bit of a premium on some of these guys, especially because some of these guys are. Some of these guys are. I don't want to say delusional because delusional is like a really rough word, but like maybe think of their self-worth a little too high, where they're thinking, "I'll sign this deal for 1 year for $3 million because I can still go get a big deal next year." I can go if I go for 900 yards, look what Ryan Grant just got, or whoever just got, I can go and work my way back up to that. So I do think that's a part of that. And I think that if you mix in the difference between, or sort of put a mixture between, the Bills still maybe not being considered a legitimate team, Buffalo not being the biggest destination for people, the fact that the team really still doesn't have a quarterback that people see as legitimate, or, they're assuming they don't even know who the starting quarterback is because they're assuming it's not A.J. McCarron. All that stuff, receivers know if I go for 700-800 yards, I go get a contract next year. So I think that having all of that stuff in place might be more important than $1 million or $2. So I don't know that we could have gotten a 1 year for 3, 1 year for 4 on some of these guys who actually ended up signing those contracts. So I don't want to blame front office too much about it, but
I think
it would have been nice to take one
with some of them. But like I don't know. I don't see the fake cap problem with like going. Maybe we did. There was rumors we did call, but Alan Hearns 2 for 12. Like that's not that crazy to me. For your third receiver.
No.
I don't know.
Yeah, it just seemed like there was a lot of
I agree with
competition there.
Some of the second tier guys, like I guess like a Cody Latimer went and signed a 1 year, 2.5 with the Giants. Thought he might be an okay fit for what we're trying to do. But there's a couple names I'm going to leave you with here today. Jordan Matthews, obviously we all know him. 25 years old, he's still unsigned. Can you get him for 1 for 3? Be quite different than what I thought when we first traded for him. Kendall Wright, another good player. I've always liked the way he plays. Jeremy Maclin, I don't think he has much worse numbers than Alan Hearns personally. And Eric Decker always seems to do enough. So there's 4 names there. Any one of those jump out to you?
I always thought that Matthews' talent was good enough to fit into the Bills' offense. It was very weird. I thought he was kind of a good fit as far as a player would, just the style that he played, working with Tyrod, working within that offense. I thought he would really work. And obviously he was very injured for a lot of the year, but even really didn't show much when he was out there. I wouldn't mind giving him another chance if he wanted to take a 1 for 3, if he liked his time here.
Sure.
I mean, other than that, Maclin is a nice veteran presence. I would never doubt that guy could go and get you 600-700 yards, be a useful part of the team. He's obviously a good veteran. So at that price, I don't think I would mind anybody that you really said, and would probably prefer that to obviously some of the contracts that I think similar players got. I mean, yeah, if you're talking about Alan Hearns, I think as soon as you hear like that 10 to 12 teams are interested in him, like he had said, I would have just dumped out if I was the Bills, because I don't think that guy's 2-3 years removed, from a decent season. He had 480 yards last year or something. I don't have it in front of me, but he's
back-to-back years.
Come off of back-to-back, like pretty useless years where, they felt more confident. They said, we're going to roll into this with D.D. Westbrook and the other three guys there that I keep forgetting their names of. Marquise Lee is a decent player, but Cole and they said we don't. I mean, the Jaguars were the other people who said we don't want to give
Dante Moncrief $10 million,
right?
Which is hilarious.
Who is also a very similar player terms of like, oh yeah, draft him for your fantasy team, and then
He's never good. He did his one Andrew Luck year, 733 and 6 touchdowns in 2015 for Moncrief, and then back-to-back 307s.
I would much rather, just answering the question, I would much rather go with the guys that you just listed at a low contract than ever get into the game of signing Moncrief. I almost think that we kind of won free agency at the receiver position by avoiding doing a horrible mistake like that.
I think we won on those horrible mistakes, but lost on some potential values. Like the Jets have I'm not kidding, 17 receivers. 17.
We might see that and say they're gonna have to cut one of those guys, and we're gonna take him and his playbook in August.
Right. I mean, Oakland is always moving, these guys around. I mean, the Jets have Anunua, Robbie Anderson, Jermaine Kearse, obviously Terrell Pryor that they just signed. I mean, I can't even get into Andre Roberts they just signed, Devin Smith, their old second-round pick from 2 years ago, Darius Stewart from last year in the third round. I mean, Jalen Marshall, who they really like. I mean, Lucky Whitehead from Dallas. They have names, and then their usual UDFAs galore there. So, I mean, they have absolute guys that I take. There's no doubt that their receiving core is ridiculously deep, but not very good. Does that make sense? It's really.
I mean, I think Kearse is the only one who's a pretty good receiver.
And he's the one that's likely to get cut out of this, which is just crazy how this position is just nuts to me, and it's definitely worth talking about. One last name I want to leave you with, Kendall Wright. Chicago, played 16 games, 59 catches for 614 and a touchdown. He's a slot machine. We need it. Never gone under 416 yards. He's tiny durability issues, but nothing crazy for a receiver. He's played in 16 games, 3 out of the 6 years, 14, 10, and 11 on the other games played there. Has had really good years, between 400 and 1,000 yards, pretty fairly consistent there. I mean, isn't that a guy that you could buy for $3 million?
Yeah, if we could get him there. I mean, I guess he's moved from team to team a couple times now, right? I mean,
just to Chicago, Tennessee for his first 5
years.
Oh,
he was there for – okay, so he was in Tennessee for 5 years and then to Chicago.
This will be his third team, but it's not crazy. He's 28. He's not super old.
That's normal. I had another player in my head. But, yeah, kind of right. I mean, he's pretty consistently a guy who catches volumes of balls. I don't think his yards per catch is ever extremely high. He's never going to be.
I mean, he's a poor man's Jarvis Landry. It's what he is.
Yeah, and I think Jarvis Landry, for as much as he gets paid, is a useful player of your team. I think he's been taking some crap as far as being overvalued, but that guy's still a value to have on your team. So yeah, if we're going this late into this part of the season, this part of the off season, I do think that he is somebody to look at, somebody that helps your team. Everybody needs a third receiver, needs your security blanket, your possession receiver. You don't want every guy to be that guy, because your offense just really isn't moving anywhere. And when you see the difference between a Kansas City offense who is doing that and then just suddenly adding a Tyreek Hill, the difference that a game changer can make, but you still need to have that guy as part of your receiving core. So yeah, I think Wright would be a good addition to this team. But I think any decent receiver would really be
It's another deep receiver year, too, in the draft. I mean, I don't know that I love anyone super much at the top. I mean, you have Cortland Sutton, James Washington.
It's a
Calvin
lower.
Ridley. Yeah.
It's one of the lowest top-end talents I think I've seen in a wide receiver draft. But I think it has just as much depth as any other year. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you came out of it in 5 years from now and you said, well, that had just as much or more talent than any other year.
Sure. I mean, you have guys down the list like Deion Kane from Clemson. I really like St. Brown from Notre Dame, Christian Kirk from A&M. There's some name, DJ Moore from Maryland, obviously the top guys we just mentioned. And there's a little bit of everything for everybody. I mean, from my draft board, from really pick 40 to pick like 90, you have like 10 guys. It's a third round picks galore, man. So it's
for sure.
Keeping a pick for a receiver, I think's got to be in the back of our head. Like, we got to make sure we can come away with one of these guys.
Yeah, it's really – I've seen plenty of these guys, like, all over the place in terms of where they're going to get drafted. I've seen people think that DJ Moore and Michael Gallup are first-round type people. Dante Pettis being high. Those are the same guys that could end up in the fourth round. It's really –
I've seen Pettis from, like, first round to fifth round.
Right. Yeah. No, the Pettis one is ridiculous because people think that he's either like
Christian Kirk too.
Christian Kirk. I mean, I think he's probably solidly in the second round range. I mean, I think Ridley, Sutton, and Kirk probably won't go past the second. But other than that, I mean, with more and then just the crazy guys who jump up, like suddenly DJ Chark's like a top guy because he ran really fast and like had that touchdown in the Senior Bowl. Even though he didn't display a ton of that during college. I mean, there's a ton of guys. I mean, nobody can agree on what to think of James Watt. People can't even, like, agree on whether he's fast or, like, big. It's, like, it's the weirdest thing. Like, people say he's big, and then he's, like, comes in at under 5'11". People say he's slow, but then he runs in the 4.4s.
And then, like, random Anthony Miller from Memphis I've seen in the top.
And I really like Anthony Miller. I think he's actually kind of a similar prospect as Zay Jones was last year. Probably a little more dynamic in a way, but just a really just good receiver.
Same range, though. Yeah, second round pick. Yep.
But, yeah, I mean, if you go down the list, I mean, there's 20, 25 receivers that I would take on our team and say, yeah, I think he's got a shot. Right
now, yeah. And like you said, if there's a year where we don't trade up and we stay at 12 and take the best available quarterback, you have 8 picks. And I mean, you can spend 2 of them at this position group, especially with the depth of this and hedge your bet a little bit. In my opinion, you don't have a third or a fourth. Or second and a fourth, however you want to look at it, or second and a third, depending on what you consider Zay Jones.
Right.
2, 3, or 4. I mean, I tend to think he's more on the 3 level right now. Taking a guy early in the middle rounds, get filled at 2 and a 4. I look at Andre Holmes as a special teamer / fifth receiver. I'm cool with him there. I don't like him any more than that, though.
No, I think you proved that last year.
Some people
that he's
think
that
he's
useful.
a 3, but like he's not.
No. We had situations where he had to be a 3 and he wasn't.
You could argue. I don't want to argue that he's a 4 or not, but I don't think he is.
Yeah, I think he was pretty much only useful inside the 1 yard line. I mean, he was borderline a tight end last year, other than the special teams work. So
with the special teams work, and he's able to do a little bit of, tight ends type of stuff, I'm fine with him on the roster as your 5th guy. You've already lost your comp pick from this year for him, so keep him. Cool with him there. Keep one of those Brandon Riley or Malachi Dupree's as your 6th receiver if you go 6. And then I'd really love to do two other guys. I need a 2nd and a 4th on this roster, Jason.
Yeah, if we could get 2 of the top 15 receivers in this draft, like I think our team would be better for it. And, obviously I'm hoping that it's, the first guy is one of the top 5 or 6 guys, so maybe we can get a real second receiver out of it. But I think no matter what we do at this point, it's really going to be by sort of a committee. I mean, it's going to be camp competition. Even if you bring in a Jeremy Maclin, I'm not ready to say, like, that guy's definitely going to be the second receiver. Produce that sort of talent.
Between him and Zay Jones, you have a 3rd and a 4th.
I think you have even if we bring in 1 vet or bring in 2 rookies or whatever, like this is going to be a situation where Zay Jones is going to have to earn the second receiver spot, or Michael Gallup's going to have to earn the second receiver spot, or DJ Moore, or whoever it is. Like it's going to be a competition, but at this point, there's really no outlet unless we're going to go trade for OBJ or something. Like, there's no, I didn't mean to bring that up because I don't want to bring that up as a realistic thing, but we don't really have the way of solidifying another number 1 or 2 spot.
No. I'm fine with not needing to take 2 receivers if you go and get one of these guys we've mentioned on this show today. And Jeremy Maclin, I mean, he is what he is. I mean, Alan Hearn just got 2 for 12, $6 million, each for having similar years to Maclin just had back-to-back 400, 500-yard receivers. Yeah. I mean, he catches 40 passes every year. So he's a perfect third receiver. I don't have issues with him. Can play, at times, he's had 1,000-yard seasons. I think he's a fine receiver. I wouldn't mind him. So I think that's the only way you can convince me going and getting like either Kendall Wright, maybe Jordan Matthews, Decker, and Maclin. Those are the only 4 that I would then scratch off a draft pick needed. And I still want 1 then instead of 2. So that's kind of my opinion on the receiver group. There's 4 final names until more cuts are happening that would strike away from me needing 2 receivers. I think we need 2 and an inside linebacker and a quarterback. I mean, those are the 4 I can't budge from. I think they'll find a veteran nickel. Is that kind of where you say, like with this whole, all the available needs? Like,
yeah. And I think they knew that there's a situation that the draft picks might be low if we have to make that trade up. And I think that's why they made a quick move on offensive line. I don't think that they feel completely compelled to go and get an offensive lineman now with the Bodine.
I don't think they do.
And Newhouse signings. I think they looked at it. They said, kind of a weak offensive line class. We got a bunch of needs. We might have to draft these ones. We're definitely going to have to do it with quarterback. We're probably going to have to do it with receiver. Let's go and take 2 guys from a free agency group that still has, guys who have started in the past.
I mean, you have 2 guys at each. You have the competition spots. I mean, you have, Newhouse versus Mills. You have, obviously the famed Dukas versus Miller, and you have the Bodine versus Groa. I mean, you have those competitions. You have those, 6 players there. And then you have your 2 starters on the left side. So you have 8-man offensive line. I've seen worse offensive lines in Buffalo. I have.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, it's hard to touch some of them.
Then this grouping, I mean, it's not that bad. And then you have, you have Connor McDermott, who they really claimed off of waivers a draft pick last year from New England.
Who I thought was an awful draft prospect, but he's still around. He might be able to turn into something.
Yeah. And Adam Redmond, too, another guy I know they were high on. So, I mean, you have a 10-man unit, and it's fairly fine to me. Like, I don't have any issues with it. Do I want a higher-end starter at right tackle? Probably.
It's the same one that we had last year, except for more competition. I mean, because the majority of the season we had to play it without Cordy. So,
yep. I mean, it's how you view Groy and Bodine versus Wood would be the only change.
Right. And I guess I was kind of transferring the fact that we had the knowledge that Groy played about as good or better than Wood that one year that he had to fill in from. I can't project that'll definitely happen in 2017.
He hasn't missed a start, and he's really good in pass pro. I mean, he's an awful run blocker. Groy's supposed to be good at it. So, we'll see what happens there. I've never seen so many mixed opinions on Newhouse either. I've seen people say he's actually didn't get enough credit for actually being decent. His line sucked in general. So a lot of interesting position groups here. Gave you a really action-packed show here on Locked On Bills. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Once again, Nick Woten will be on Thursday. Jason and I will be back. We'll definitely be back on a Monday show, right, Jason? Is that what we want to do, a Monday show?
I think that a Monday show would be good.
Okay, we'll be back on a Monday show. Nick is here to do a Thursday show on some, Nick's beat reporter. So we'll get some more quick Q&A type of things, more what's going on the everyday transactional end. See if anything happens there. So look out for Nick Woten now with Locked On Thursdays. Jason and I will be back with you on Mondays and Tuesdays as well. So a lot going on, Jason. Really appreciate you having on. And, from Locked On Bills, I'm Kevin Masseri. Check out all the other Locked On editions. Locked On Draft's a great one to check out right now, Jason. So check that one out. I'm Kevin Masseri. That's Jason Shannon.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, I've heard you. I will not tell that machine made by Amazon with a female's name to play a Locked On podcast. But you can do it. You can tell to play, program, Locked On, whatever your favorite is. And I promise I won't say, okay, that big, huge mammoth brand that makes all sorts of things, play podcast, such and such anymore. I've heard you. But just let you know, you can do it. You can play all of your Locked On podcast networks on your smart home devices. The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now just about everywhere.